Thank you for joining us at the Luohan Webinar. Today, we are pleased to have Dr. Peng Wensheng as our speaker. Dr. Peng is the chief economist and the head of research for China International Capital Corporation. He is also the executive dean at the CICC Global Institute. His research interests include the Chinese economy, digital economy, and microfinance. Before joining CICC, he was the chief economist at Everbright Securities and the global chief economist at CITIC Securities. Before that, Dr. Peng was the chief China economist at Barclays Capital and the head of economic research and mainland China affairs at Hong Kong Monetary Authority. Also, he worked as an economist at the International Monetary Fund. Today, he will talk about the digital transformation and its economic impacts. Welcome, Dr. Peng. Now is your time. And would you mind that we ask questions during your talk or at the end of the talk?
Feel free to interrupt me.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? Yeah.
Okay, please, your time.
Okay. Thanks, Yadong, for that kind introduction. The topic of my talk today is two sides of the digital economy, particularly following the COVID-19. In the wake of the COVID-19, there has been acceleration of the digital transformation of the economy in the world, and that brings a lot of opportunities in terms of raising efficiency, and particularly dealing with the pandemic, but they also raises challenges, raises questions, and for example, we have noticed the development in the antitrust issue, monopoly, competition issues, etc. So that's I have this title, the two sides of the digital economy. So it brings opportunities as well as challenges. So today I will share with you my source from a macroeconomic point of view. What is the impact of the digital transformation? Now, I will start with my first slide from a macro perspective. Why the digital economy development is important for China, from two perspectives. One is from the real economy, the other is from a financial perspective. From the real economy, it is well known that population or demographic dividend has been widely cited as an important driver of economic growth in China in the past decades, right? But that so-called demographic dividend actually peaked if we measure it by working age population increase, the annual increase in the working age population. That annual increment peaked in the early years of this century, and actually in the past 10 years. The annual increase in working age population rapidly declined, and now it is, the working age population actually started to decline. The level of the working age population started to decline in recent years, in the past 2 or 3 years. So that's a big challenge for the real side of the Chinese economy in the next 10 years. So the real question is whether digital transformation will work to raise the efficiency of the factors of production, like labor, right? So that at least partly it will offset the impact of population aging on economic growth. To what extent and how we should see this issue, right? And on the face of it, there seems to be a some contradiction in the popular press. For example, on the one hand, we are worried about the population aging. We are worried about the short of labor supply, right, because of the aging population. But on the other hand, we have heard a lot of worries, stories about machines replacing labor, AIs replacing labor. Previously, machines replace labor in terms of physical labor, right? Now machines can replace human brains, so that's a lot of worry. So of these two worries, they seem to be in conflict. Which one is more important? Right? So I think that's a big macroeconomic question. The other perspective is from the financial sector. In the past 10 years, as I mentioned earlier, the labor increase has been declining, right? And therefore demographic dividend as a driver of economic growth has been declining. But an important driver on the demand side has been important. That is the interaction between the property sector or the housing sector and the financial sector. What we summarize as a financial cycle, the upturn of the financial cycle in China, and that has been an important support of the macroeconomy, and that partly reflects the special rule of land or properties as a collateral of bank lending. But as a result of the reinforced or strengthened financial regulation and supervision starting from 2017, in the past few years, we are seeing the second phase of this financial cycle. So that is reflected in some cooling down of the property sector nationwide, despite some continued heating in the first-tier cities, and also, or perhaps more importantly, tightening of overall credit, as reflected in the slowdown of broader money growth and social finance growth. So that is also, in a way, related to digital transformation. So in the next 10 years, what is going to happen to the financial sector? Particularly in China, this digital transformation involves in a significant way in the financial sphere. That is particularly some platform enterprises, including Tencent Finance and Finance, particularly, for example, they have developed digital finance or fintech or platform-based finance. So how would that impact on the financial intermediation and the financial cycles? And recently, there's a lot of attention paid to the digital renminbi that is being tested and expected to be launched not in a not distant future by the People's Bank of China, right? So the so-called central bank digital currency. How would that impact on the finance, on the financial intermediation in the digital era? So these are the two broad macroeconomic perspectives that I hope my talk today will shed some light on. Next slide. So the first question is, how should we see the digital economy? How do we define what is a digital economy, or what do we mean by digital transformation? Here I find a presentation bio academic paper in 2017 is particularly useful for us to think about the digital transformation. So the digital economy consists of 3 layers. Right? The first layer is the so-called core layer, which is like the infrastructure of the digital economy. Without this infrastructure, we will not have a digital economy. That is related to, for example, semiconductor, information technology, communication technology, smart hardware, etc. Right? So that's the first layer. Right? The second layer is what we call application layer, and the most important example is platform economy or platform enterprises like Alibaba, Tencent, Facebook, Amazon, and all these big names. This is kind of a new business model that is built on the application of big data in the network, etc. So that's the second layer. The third layer is the broader economy. Right? Today, almost every economic activity, in some way, is related to or involves data, information, technology, etc. So in that sense, all the economic activities are digital economic activities. So that involves a broader digitization of industries, like Industry 4.0, the application in agricultural sector, e-commerce, etc. Right? So of these 3 layers, perhaps of the most interest or the most importance is the second layer, because this is a new business model, new structure. Right? It basically changes how the economic entities operate, and it brings new challenges in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, antitrust, monopolies, efficiency gains, and network effects. So the second layer or platform economy is something new or something fundamentally new. Right? Now, and therefore, in terms of economic analysis, this second layer has received particular attention in our analysis of the digital economy. Now, of these 3 layers, we had a systematic analysis. CICC Research Department and the CICC Global Institute. We published in-depth research report last September, which provides a systematic analysis of all these 3 layers, right? Including specific sectors. Now, our conclusion is that for China, of these 3 layers, the second layer has been developed very rapidly, or is the strongest, right? Is the most advanced when we compare with other countries. Right? So in this world, probably we can say that US and China are the two economies that have most big name platform enterprises. Right? But for the other 2 layers, the core part, the core layer, we lag behind. For example, the recent development in the semiconductors, the chips, and we know what how the U.S. sanctions against Huawei has impact on Huawei. So that's a clear demonstration in a way of our weakness in the core layer. And in the third layer, in the broader economic digital transformation, we are also somewhat lag behind. Probably not as behind as the core layer, but still is relatively weak compared with more advanced economies. And that is, in my view, reflects the overall development, overall stage of economic development of China in the global context. Right? So the second layer is of particular interest, particular importance, and has also raised significant controversies. So I will pay particular attention to this in my in the later slides. The next one. When we talk about digital economy, we often say that data is a new factor of production, and this is very important, or is key to understand how digital economy, particularly platform economy or platform enterprises, are different from the traditional enterprises, and the digital economy is different from the traditional economy. Now, as a factor of production, data or data-based products and services have an important property of being non-rival or non-rivalry. Right? That means their use are not competitive. Right? So, and as a result, the marginal cost of expansion of a new product or new service is very low. In many cases, it's almost zero. And as a result of that, network effects are very strong, can become very, very high, and we have big network, right? And that brings in economics what we call the economy of scale and economy of scope. Economy of scale measures as the scale of one product or one service increase, the average cost declines. The economy of scale means that the marginal cost of extending into new area, new business lines is also very low. And therefore you can, platform enterprises can easily, or at least compared with traditional enterprise, can extend or expand into new business at a low cost. So that's the key property or key feature of data as a factor of production. Now, I think it's useful we see this in the historical context. In an agricultural economy, we basically have two major factors of production, right? Labor and land. Industrial economy, we have labor and productive capital. And in the digital economy, we have labor, capital, and data. Right? So labor always there. Right? From agriculture to industrial to digital economy, when I talk about a shift from land to capital, and to a certain degree to data. So the question is, what is the difference between land, capital, and data? And I think the big difference is, there are different degree of rivalry or competitiveness, competition in their use. Land is most competitive in use, is the most rival, the highest degree of rivalry, because land is basically, we're talking about space. Right? If one entity occupies a piece of land, that space belongs to that entity. Right? Others cannot share. So that's and every piece of land is different. You cannot recreate. Right? So a piece of land in Shanghai or in Beijing, right, is limited in supply. You cannot compare a piece of land in Beijing or in Shanghai with a piece of land in a remote country area, or you cannot shift a piece of land from remote country area to Beijing if land is not enough in supply in Beijing. So land is most rival. When we compare to the industry economy, productive capital like machines, equipment, etc., they are also competitive, or in their use, right? Or they have some degree of being rivalry. Right? So you cannot recreate a piece of equipment at zero cost. Right? But if a machine is compared with a land, the degree of rivalry declines, because you can recreate, right? You can manufacture a tool or a productive tool, right? So for example, if a car supply is automobile supply is not sufficient, adequate in China, we can import from US, from Europe. Right? If the global productive capacity in the automobile industry is not sufficient, we can build up a new productive capacity. Right? So the degree of rivalry declined. Now, come to the digital economy. For data as a new factor of production, the degree of rivalry declines further to zero almost. So it's non-rivalry. So the implication is that the production factor that augments labor or that complements labor in combination with labor, their rivalry has declined. As a result, the economy of scale or the efficiency has declined, has increased from agricultural economy to industrial economy, now to the digital economy. So I think that's the key feature that we should keep in mind when we think about the digital economy from a historical point of view. Now, of course, this rivalry or non-rivalry is from the efficiency from productivity point of view, right? Or from technology point of view. Right? But we know that every technology, right, we also have social relations, production relationship. Right? So that's related to who owns the data, who has the user rights of the data. Right? So that involves in social and political, institutional arrangements in the economy, in the country. Right? So what we call is excludability. Right? So maybe the use of some data is restricted to to a small part of participants, of players, or of enterprises. Right? So the question is then which one is important? If according to Marxism or Marx, the economics of Marx, technology is the determinant. Right? Technology will determine the social and the production relationship. Right? But of course, we know that the political arrangements, social relations, institutions, they will also have they were in a way on the reverse direction. Right? They will come back to to have an impact on the use of data. So there is this I think this potential conflict. Right? So we are still in the learning process, both for market players and for regulators, for governments, right? and for the social, for the society as a whole, we are still learning how to reconcile these two perspectives. Right? In the long term, maybe it is the technology that will determine the social relations, the production relationships. But what that will be look like, right? We don't know. It is still evolving. Right? For example, if we look at the recent incidents in events in China, in US, and in Europe, how the authorities are dealing with platform economies, platform enterprises. This is very much a new phenomenon. Everybody is learning. This is kind of very much something is in a way learning by doing. Next slide.
Then under this point of view, if data is viewed as a factor of production, then what do you think is a good measure of marginal product of data?
Sorry, what's good measure?
What is a good measure of marginal product of data?
Yeah, that's important and difficult question, right? Because an important feature of the digital economy is that they have this cross market or cross business line relations. So the productivity, if we try to measure it by monetary measures like GDP or monetary based productivity measures, in many cases it's not that straightforward, right? So that's also a difficult question. Why antitrust or competition monopoly issues are very much controversial issue.
Okay, thank you.
So the platform economy represents a new business model. And this is, I guess this chart is familiar to many people. So I will not dwell on this. Basically, it's from traditional economy, one-sided market, to platform economy, multi-side, two-sides or multi-sides market. The next time. And in terms of macro implications of the digital economy, I will look at it from these five angles, five perspectives. One is how it will impact on economic growth, particularly as China, and for that matter, also to a lesser degree, Europe, US also, we are all facing population aging, right? So how or where digital economy development help to offset the effect of the population aging. Right? The other is on the economic structure, from the manufacturing, so service, etc. And the other perspective is industry organization. Basically, I talk about competition, monopoly, and antitrust issues. International trade also, how from merchandise trade to service trade, how that is related to digital economy, and then of course the income distribution issue. Digital economy has this feature of so-called winners take all, right? So there is this concern that the society, the economy will become more polarized. So these five perspectives. The first one, the next slide. So will this digital transformation help offset the effect of population aging on economic growth? I think it is useful to look at it from both the supply and the demand side. On the supply side, the labor supply declines, but if labor productivity improves, that will at least offset the decline in labor supply in terms of the overall productive capacity. So that from on the supply side, it should help. Now, the question is on the demand side. The demand side is, machines or AIs, they cannot replace human beings for consumption, or machines do not have consumption demand. Right? So this raises two questions. Right? One is that in a population aging society with digital transformation, we will have a feature of probably oversupply economy. So the supply side is partly offset by machines, by AIs, but the consumption side declines by the full extent of the population aging. Right? So this is a kind of a low desire. It is a society with low desire, no demand, right? And in terms of economic and financial developments, that means low inflation, right? Low interest rates. Right? So that's. But the second question is related to, what drives technology progress? Right? We typically in economics, we typically view technology progress, science and technology innovations. They are mostly from the supply side. The research and development, R&D, talent-based innovation institutions, etc. So we typically view that from the supply side. But the development in the past few decades, right, particularly in the US and in China. In US, a typical example is Apple. Right? In China, a typical example is Alibaba or Tencent. Right? So in this new era, it seems that sometimes demand or consumption drives innovations, right? or drives technology progress. Now, if we view this from this perspective, then that's a pretty negative implication, right? Because with aging population, less demand, less desire, then it means that in the future, probably a slower pace of innovation. Right? Yes, to some extent, digital economy, digital transformation will help offset population aging to some extent, but it seems that, to say the least, it cannot fully offset. And if we think about innovation, at least partly is also related to human beings' desire to have a better life, right? Then probably the negative implication is more serious. And from that angle, there is a question, for example, why Japan missed the digital transformation. Right? Why Japan? Japan's manufacturing sector, the consumer goods were at an advanced stage of development in 1970s and the 80s. Right? Why they missed? Partly is one of the explanations that I have seen is from the demand side, from the consumption side. Right? With the aging population, you have less desire for new things, for new businesses, for new products, etc. So that's something we need to keep in mind. The next slide. The next one is related to, in a way, to economic structure or income distribution. That is, and employment also. that's related to how the capital and the labor are related. It's capital or machines, AIs, they replace labor, and therefore lead to a labor saving effect, or they enhance, they are complementary to labor. They raise labor productivity. Therefore, they are labor enhanced. So now I have this hypothesis. I want to explain for you to comment and to criticize or whatever. My view is that there are two reasons for us to see that at this stage of development, machines or AIs or digital transformation is more labor saving in the US and more labor complementary or labor enhancement in China. So put it simply, it helps labor in China and is detrimental to labor in the US. And we have seen, anecdotal evidence or examples. For example, in the US, some routine jobs, assembly lines, manufacture, repetitive service work, they are replaced by machines. But in China, some non-routine jobs, for example, couriers, delivery drivers, ride-hailing drivers, anchors, internet anchors, etc. So they benefit from the digital transformation. Right? Now, why there are these differences between US and China? There are two reasons. On the supply side, is obvious. Right? The labor cost is lower in China than in the US. So any machines that are intended to replace labor, right, they will make more profit to be used in the US, right, because the cost of a machine or robot is same because it's a international trade, right? But the cost, the labor cost, is different. Right? So that's from the supply side. That's a different stage of different development, different income. Means that if a machine is intended to be complementary to the labor, they are more likely to be used in China than in the US. The other reason on the demand side, which is less obvious, right? That is, China has a large population, high density, population density. Now, of course, the US is all in relative terms. Right? US also has a large population if we compare, most other countries. But compared with China, still the size is much smaller, and population density is also much lower in the US than in China. So for courier, for delivery, for ride-hailing, driving, all this, it makes more sense. More business sense to operate in China. And here now, of course, there are other large population countries in this world. For example, India, Indonesia, some other countries. Right? Now, why China has developed more rapidly? I think that's partly related to the physical infrastructure. Right? For the digital transformation to have impact, you need to you need not only the labor, right? You need also the infrastructure, physical infrastructure. highways, railways, or airlines, or all this, right? So and at a similar level of development, China is much more advanced in terms of physical infrastructure developments. So that's another factor. So now, so how that will be shown up in the income distribution? We have the next chart. Next slide. Now this slide we show a labor share of income, in terms of national income, right, in the U.S. and China. In U.S. in the last 20 years, the labor share has declined significantly. Right? The return on capital or more or less a mirror image increase. In China is very much different. In the first few years, or the first 10 years of this century, labor share also declined. But past 10 years, labor share in China has rebounded very strong, which shows that the labor's income, the income of labor in the overall economy has increased. Now, what explains this difference? Right? One popular story in the literature is that why labor share in the U.S. declined. One explanation is international trade, right? or exactly because of China. Right? The manufacturing jobs moved to China, and therefore that is not good for the labor's wages in the U.S. Now, but if we look at this chart carefully, it shows that in the first 10 years of this century, while the labor share in the U.S. declined, the labor share in the U.S. in China also declined. So at least that seems to be contradictory to this story. So at least China's labor did not benefit from the decline in the labor share in the U.S. They both decline. Now, of course, or maybe there are some other third parties, capital basically, they benefited from this international trade in both countries. But that is counter, that counters or work against this argument that is China's labor or China's low wage that is that was the driver. So the second explanation is the relationship between or the bargaining position of labor relative to capital. I remember Larry Summers published or written an article last year or the year before, I forgot. So basically argue that in the U.S. the labor shares decline is mainly due to the decline in the relative position of labor in bargaining with capital in the U.S. Now, I think that argument probably is somewhat, in my view, is valid to at least to some extent. Right? China's case, for example, in the past 10 years, while labor share increase, I believe in significant part, at least, is due to improved bargaining position of labor. Right? Now, that partly probably is related to the demographics itself, but also related to government policy in terms of better social safety net, better social security, and more government policies in protecting workers' rights. So I think that I agree that is probably one factor that was working in the US and in China, although in opposite direction. But on the other hand, I personally believe that technology progress probably also being a factor at play. Along the logic, the story that I described it in the previous slide. Right? So at least that's a reasonable story to tell. Next slide. This digital transformation also.
Sorry, Wensheng.
Yes.
So what do you mean by technology story? So what the exact logic here? So how does technology explain the opposite trend in US versus China?
Oh, okay. We can go back to the one more previous one. Yeah, go back to this slide. So my story is that machines or AIs, they are more complementary to labor in China than in the US, or put it another way, they are more likely to raise the productivity of labor in China rather than simply replacing labor.
Why? How do we know in which country it will complement, or in which country it will replace? What's the logic?
Yes. That's why I say it is a hypothesis, right? So this is a hypothesis. The logic is that for two reasons. On the supply side, labor cost is lower in China than in the US. So any machines that are intended to replace labor, they are much more likely to be used in the US than in China, because the cost of that machine is the same, because they are international trade. Right? But the cost of labor is still very different. Right? So for example, our per capita GDP is still only 1/6 of the US. So so any labor that are any machines that are intended to be working with labor, right, complementary to labor, raise labor capacity in production, they are more likely to be applied in China because of the lower cost of labor. Now, the second reason is less obvious. Right? That is what I mentioned earlier, that on the demand side, China's population is much larger than US, and there are many more big cities in China. Right? So like delivery guys, ride-hailing drivers, anchors, who sell goods on internet. I remember when I lived worked in the US in DC. That's many years ago, from 95, from 93 to 98. In the US at that time, you have TV channels, right? Specifically, people sell goods on TV channels, advertisements, etc. Live, maybe not live models. Right? Today is very popular in China, and it's not on TV, it's on internet, on different platforms, and some popular what we call the Wanheng, stars, internet stars. They have become very productive in terms of advertising, selling goods, etc. So now, why in China it has developed so much or more advanced in this business model than in the US? There may be many explanations. My explanation is that on the demand side, because we live together much closely, people, right? Higher density. So for people to deliver, for delivery guys, it makes a lot of more economic sense. Right? So in China, in the big cities, Beijing, Shanghai, for a delivery guy, he can only serve one block of building. That way, that will be enough or more than enough to pay for his wages. Right? In the US, I guess it's very difficult to imagine, right? For delivery guys to to serve one block, and then that will be enough to pay for it. Now, there is another story that I mentioned earlier, that is China's infrastructure, physical infrastructure, highways, roads, high-speed railways, airlines, all this much more developed compared with other populous countries like India or Africa. So that's another reason why all this work together: labor, digital, and physical infrastructure. Anyway, that's my hypothesis and the reasoning. Right? So it may not be right. Yeah,
I think it's it's interesting hypothesis. So basically, firstly, this is an important question. So people have been debating a lot about whether AI will replace labor, but I think that thus far the debate has been pretty crude. And so here, and then when they go a little bit further, they talk about the differentiate jobs by routine or non-routine, which is some progress. But really, I think you are providing another angle. So your point is that we have to think about the labor cost. In countries when the labor cost is lower, then probably it's not worthy to replace them. So actually it's going the other way around. But I think there's a certain argument of that. So but I think this is actually verifiable, because then we can look at the different countries and regions, because there's heterogeneity of the labor costs to see how the penetration of technology takes place. And so if that's true, that provides a more interesting hypothesis, the interpretation of the relation between technology and the labor. So because this is really actually a very important issue. I remembered, Mike Spence, he wrote a book and he talked to me many times. He's as a list of economists who are worried that machine will replace, because the old development story is that the later countries will actually, when they are going through industrialization, then the labor, because labor cost is cheaper, then they can improve the technology, the productivity, etc. But then if machines will replace them, then where do they go? So I think Mike Spence and a lot of economists will worry about this, but obviously we're not seeing exactly this happening. But what exactly happening anyway, there's no good interpretation. I think probably even the interpretation by Asimoglu and other people is still very crude. So I think this is very worthy to verify, but I'm not exactly sure how it turns out. But I think it's not too hard to check that. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, if you are interested in this issue, we can talk further on this later. Okay. Thanks for that comment. In international trade, this is also from the literature, right? This is this chapter. I think it's from Richard Baldwin, right? This is so basically the idea is that the transportation cost and the communication cost, they declined from agriculture economy to industrial and to digital. So now we are talking about communication cost declines a lot, and therefore service will become tradable. And in the very, very future, we can imagine a situation where, let's say, all the manufacturing jobs in the US are replaced by robots, right? By machines. Then manufacturing goods in terms of tradability, will be much reduced. But the service, like for example, now in China, some Chinese students, they receive English tuition from teachers in the US or teachers in England. Right? So this is only signs of tradable services. Right? Now, and therefore, naturally, next slide raises questions about economic development model. Right? So China's successful story, or East Asia's successful story, Japan, China, Korea, etc. It's basically about manufacturing and international trade. Right? Or fundamentally, it probably is more about international trade. Right? It's not that somehow manufacturing is so important. It's because manufacturing goods are tradable, and therefore you have a much bigger market. You have competition drives technology progress, efficiency, etc. So in the future, when manufacturing goods become less tradable and services become more tradable, then there is this question: what's the future growth model? Now, in the literature, some people say, well, in the future, it is India's model, right? It's not China's. But we need to be careful with what do we mean by tradable services, right? In the digital area, in the digital era is very much different. China's services has very much developed rapidly. For example, in terms of e-commerce, right? Like Alibaba, in terms of promoting international trade, right? By the small and medium-sized enterprises in China. So that's the one area we need to pay attention to. The next one. And this we are already seeing some early signs of that. If we look at China, because tradable for a big country like China, when we talk about tradable, it also means tradable between different regions. Right? It's not only about tradable with other countries. Here is it's not our estimate. It's estimated by the Industry and Information Ministry. Their research institute has estimated the different provinces in China in terms of the digital goods and services value added. If we compare the coastal area, by the traditional measure of economic development, coastal area is much higher. For example, in terms of per capita GDP or GDP, or the GDP size, right? It's not only about per capita. It's much higher than inland area. But if we measure by the digital value added, there's still some difference, but the difference is not that large. Why? Because traditional economy, we have labor migration. Labor migrates from inland area to the coastal area, or industrial migration. Industry, migrate from coastal area to the inland area. But in the digital area, we are talking about digital migration, data migration, right? Digital industry migration. So people don't need to move. And as I mentioned earlier, because of non-rivalry, the marginal cost of expansion is very low for digital products, digital services. So it's much easier for digital migration than labor migration or industrial migration. And therefore, the development gap in terms of digital economy is much smaller. So I think we haven't looked at the data across countries, but I think within China this feature is very interesting, because we're talking about one country with the same institutions, more or less, right? Same macro policy, etc., same economic policy, same regulation.
Excuse me, Dr. Peng, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Regarding the digital migration, would you please explain a little bit more? So what do you mean by the digital industry migration on the new model? And what are the differences between this model and the traditional model?
Yeah. For example, if let's say if a student in Shanghai needs to have a tutor in mathematics or in literature, previously you need to have that tutor somewhere close to you, to where you live. At least it's in Shanghai. Probably Shanghai is too big even. But now you can, for students in Shanghai, you can have a tutor based in Beijing or based in Sichuan province, or even in Xinjiang province, very far west of the far western part of the country. Right?
Okay,
and
I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's another version of international trade in a regional scale.
Yeah, that's one example. We can talk about many other services, lawyer, legal services, medical services, in some cases even social services, right? If it doesn't require absolute physical contact, for example.
So then, can you draw a little more, some more conclusions regarding the regional pattern? If you considering this digital industry migration, what do you think of China's regional disparity in the digital era?
Yeah. So for example, some I think Alibaba. I'm not sure. Yadong or colleagues from friends from Alibaba can correct me. I think some big platform companies, they place their back office or data processing centers in, for example, in Guizhou province, right? That's another example.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's something I think also we need to is interesting to note. The next slide.
Well, so in Wensheng,
yes.
So in nature, this is open economy. So essentially, it's really just like China opening up. This is the region opening up because of digital technologies. So essentially, it's open economy, and with supply and demand both open. So what does that mean for digital development? So that's
because even though it's open economy, right? Labor cannot move. Now, of course, China
but that's
is
exactly the same. Okay, it's the same because like China's opening to the world. So, or any country, it kind of get into the WTO or whatever it is. Then essentially your demand and supply, your capacity, is expanding the boundary of the market. But then still people don't move that much, right?
Yeah.
So, but then it changes your demand. It changes your supply capacity. So then, how do you develop your regional economy within this context?
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? So in the traditional model, because people cannot move, right? So you move machines, you move capital, right? Now and that will help to kind of reduce the income gaps between the rich and the poor countries. But move capital is not cost free, right? It involves cost. It involves expenses. But in the digital area, we are talking about some new services, digital services. You can expand. You can move at almost zero cost. So that's in my view, that's the difference, right? For example, the example I gave that a student who have a tutor, who is located far away from the student. Why we can do that? Because now the digital service, the cost is very, very low.
Well, I think it's still let's separate the two type of the labor, of the supply. One type is that it doesn't matter is whether it's about supplying services or products. It's still that it's like the open economy. So whether you are in Shanghai or Hangzhou, you can actually serve people far away. So that's very much like the open economy. That's one type. Another type is, and it becomes much easier. So in this sense, it reduces the friction of the open economy, make it so much easier so that labor does not need to travel. You are really supplying globally, and your demand comes globally too. But then another thing is now those platforms is really plays the role of coordination. It coordinates unprecedented level of the supply and demand, makes everybody can be part of this. So that is platforms plays a kind of different role from the normal labor or factories or production, whatever it is. So I think to me, I mean, I'm trying to discuss this with you. So basically, there are two levels look at this issue. One level is it's really the open economy with reduced the friction cost. That's the huge part of this because of digital technology. Another part is this coordinator nowadays developed to facilitate this. So there are two sides of this. That seems to be what's going on.
Yes, I think you are right. You are absolutely right. So these platform economies, right? They play a very important role in collecting the service provider and the service receiver. That's a new thing. Because of that platform, the cost of service delivery, the digital service delivery in a way, is very low. Okay, now it's already 10:10. I have to be faster. So the next one is about in a way it's related to income distribution also, but from a different angle, or from the investment angle in a way, who benefits from technological advancement or technology progress. This is an insight from Bauman's article in 1960s. So basically, the idea is very simple. That is, if with perfect competition, any excess profit will be erased due to competition in the sector that has experienced rapid technology progress. Now, then who will benefit from the efficiency gain in the technology progress in that sector? It is other sectors that benefit. Which sectors? Those sectors that have no productivity growth, like because of the monopoly, and therefore efficiency is low, the supply is limited, and their price will increase. For example, this chart we show in the U.S., for example, in the past 20 years or so, the price increase. If we look at those sectors that have rapid progress in technology or efficiency gains, actually price declines. And education, medical services, housing, etc. The price increase a lot because of limited supply. Different ratios of monopoly. So this leads to the question of this competition and monopoly issues. That is a very much a hot issue now. Next slide. So what is the good or bad monopoly? Should we protect competition or should we protect the competitors? So there are two recent examples. One is in the US, this Rain Design laptop stand. This is a story. We heard this story that it is reported that Amazon copied somebody else laptop standard design and sell it at a lower price, and so it benefits the consumers, but is it a fair way of competition. That's the question. In China, there's also a recent example, what we call the community group purchase. Right? So people, local resident, they group together, they buy things on discounts. Right? So basically the idea is old. People, if you buy a bigger volume, you get a big discount. But in this case, because of the platform enterprises, right, the competition, some of them they offer much bigger or sharper discounts to gain market share. And in this case also, it seems that consumers benefit, but that kind of competition or competitive behavior has, were detrimental, harmful to the traditional small shops on the street corner. Right? So there is this issue. How we should view this. The next slide. And very much in recent debate in China also, we think that very much can be summarized between what we call structuralism or behavioralism. That is, whether it is a structure, for example, market share, that determines your behavior, whether it's good or bad behavior, or whether behavior determines the structure, is the bad behavior that leads to a particular structure. Right? So this is two opposite schools of arguments in the literature, so-called Harvard School and Chicago School, and if we look at the recent developments in both in the U.S. and in China, in China particularly in the past years, if we look at it, it seems that the authorities are taking a behavioral view of on the thing. So it's not that they want to split and finance or split Meituan. They basically regulate and supervise your behavior. So that seems to be the policy line or the policy stand. Right? Now, whether that will work or whether that is the most optimal way, I think people may have different views, arguments. Next slide. And one way, we have in our report last September, we made an argument that for platform companies, how should we promote their innovation and prevent from them become a hurdle, a barrier to future innovations in the economy. We argue that probably we should include R&D spending as a share of their revenue, for example, as an indicator whether the platform monopoly is a better one or is a good one. And here we show a chart that, for example, compare Google and Baidu, compare with Facebook and Tencent, Amazon with Alibaba and Meituan. On averages, it seems that our big names, their R&D spending as a share of revenue has declined from 2015 to 2019 quite significantly. So in a way, that's not a good sign in terms of promoting innovation.
Okay, Dr. Peng, you have 15 minutes left.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so above is kind of the real economy side of the digital transformation. So I have a few slides on the financial side. quickly go through. I will basically take the digital currency point of view, or digital currency perspective. So the traditional monetary system, or the traditional structure is some kind of a pyramid structure. So we have the central bank at the top, or Ministry of Finance as the top. We have so-called the base money, the reserve money, and that provides power for commercial banks to extend the lending, and lending loans, banks' loans become our deposit at the banks, and those deposits are money, and we can use that as for payments, etc. So in this traditional structure, there are two features. One is payment services and financial services are combined. So, secondly, financial services are licensed to operate. So they are under government supervision, government financial supervision, banking supervision. So in the digital era, next slide, we have a digital platform. They provide payment services like Alipay, WeChat, and the Facebook Liberal. Although it's still launched yet, but the idea is similar. So now we have a different is kind of a traditional structure plus platform-based payments or digital currency. Now payment services initially at least, right, they are combined with platform functional services. It's not financial services. Platform function in WeChat is a social platform. Yeah. In Alipay is related to e-commerce. Right? So which are very different from traditional financial service. So the question is where to develop financial services, because historically financial services develop out of payment services. Now, exactly that's what has happened in China, at least. Right? That is, if regulation allows, payment services will give rise to development of financial services. So that raised the question, how we should supervise this. Now, why that's an important question. Next slide. Exactly because payment services in this case, initially, they are not combined with financial services. They are mingled with real economy functional services. So here, you have two kinds of network effects combined. One is traditional, the network effect of the currency. The more people use it, lower the transaction cost, and therefore more people are willing to use it. So the scale, that will give the so-called the economy of scale, right? Now, the digital platform, they have a different kind of network effect. Right? So more people use it, higher the efficiency, lower cost, and more people are willing to use it for social interactions, for online purchases, etc. Right? So here is the digital products or services. Right? The non-rivalry feature, zero marginal cost feature that I mentioned earlier, and they have this feature of monopoly or winners take all feature. So we are talking about a combination of these two networks. These two networks, each individually, they are very powerful on the individual base. If you combine them together, they will become even more powerful. So that's, I think, very much, that's the fundamental reason why, if this platform, they develop financial services, that will raise the regulators or supervisors attention, and that raised a whole set of new questions, how you would supervise this, regulate this.
Well, I know your time is tight, Wensheng, but really in almost every industry, we can make the same argument. But at least in China, in almost any industry, except for WeChat, I think the market share is diverging. I do not see empirical evidence of winner takes all at all. If it's true, Ant or Alibaba, I'm talking about Alipay, and Alibaba won't feel so painful these days. Look at their market share. So I disagree with the winner takes all, but I think in some areas it does. But empirical evidence does not support that.
I think you are right that the platform competitions between platforms are very
fierce,
very severe, right, in China.
Yeah.
Now, so from that angle, I agree with you. But there's another angle that is, when you combine that with financial services are licensed to operate. So that's why how to regulate it, this become an important issue. It comes in because
it's a separate issue, right? It's not about we can argue that we have to think about the financial regulation in the digital era. That I agree, but I don't think we can argue winner takes all. It's a very different issue.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my view is that because it's licensed and by definition, licensed means that only some of the players will get this license. So that's how complication comes in. Anyway, so yeah. The next slide. So this changes the ecology of finance. So anyway, these are not some ideas I already mentioned. So I skip this because of time in this. The other one, then we have central bank digital currency comes in. So basically the structure becomes the traditional one, the digital platform, and then central bank digital currency. So how this will impact? Next slide. In China's case, we are talking about DCEP, so digital currency electronic payments. Basically, it's about payments or electronic payments. It's about replacing cash, replacing banknotes. So there are several features. For example, the most important one is zero interest, right? So the central bank will not pay interest. So it's basically it's like a cash. Right? It's like banknotes, and as a result of this, it will be in a way, it's central bank will benefit from so-called convenience yield, because we are willing to hold cash without getting any interest, because cash gives us convenience in terms of payments. Right? So this, in a way, will help to reverse some of the impact of cash decline, use of cash decline, from central bank's point of view. Right? So central bank will regain some of this convenience yield, and depending on the design, because here I'm not sure what exactly they were the features of the design. I believe. Or I think under some scenarios, Alipay and WeChat will be under pressure, because in China, in any case, cash is more or less already, to a large extent, already replaced, right, by Alipay and WeChat. So in a way, there's not much cash to be replaced already. Right? So to some extent, I would say the real pressure will be on Alipay and WeChat. The next slide. Now there's another type of central bank digital currency that is in the economics literature, or or analysis research by some other central banks. That is that the central bank will pay interest on this digital currency. In this case, it is not the pressure on Alipay or WeChat is a pressure on traditional banks, because this interest-bearing central bank digital currency will be a competitor for bank deposits. Right? So that's the next slide. And how much banks makes in terms of convenience yield? We have estimated both for China and the US. In net, China's the banking system in China earns in terms of GDP much higher, almost double that of the US. In China, every year Chinese banks makes about 2% of GDP in terms of convenience yield. That is for deposits of consumers. We are willing to sacrifice in terms of interest earnings by holding bank deposits. In the US, it's 1.2% of GDP. Right? The next slide. Now, how central bank currency or digital currency will be supplied? Right? We can look at it from both the asset and the liability side. If in China's case, at this stage, if it is DCEP or digital renminbi, we're talking about replacing zero interest bearing, replacing cash. They are on the central bank's liability side. Right? Cash currency in circulation is also on the liability side. So basically, we're talking about one liability replace another liability. So theoretically, at least we can say it's likely that the size of the central bank balance sheet will not be affected by this innovation. So and therefore, from macro point of view, the effect on the macroeconomy, on the financial sector, is minimal. My own view is that I have been arguing in previous articles or speeches. I made arguments that we basically can neglect. We can we don't need to include this DCEP in our analysis of the macroeconomy or the financial market development, because the size of the balance sheet will not change. But if it is interest bearing, then the demand for the central bank digital currency can be large, right? And then therefore it cannot be accommodated in the existing structure of the balance sheet of the central bank. So you need to expand the size of the balance sheet. You either increasing foreign assets or increase domestic assets. Most likely it's increasing domestic assets. For example, you buy central bank buy more of government bonds, or central bank provide refinancing activity, lending to the banks or to non-bank real economy entities, etc. In that case, central bank digital currency will be an important instrument in terms of monetary policy, in terms of fiscal policy, even potentially for fiscal policy, etc. And therefore, very much bigger macro applications and macroeconomic implications. So I will stop here. It's already close to 10:30 now, I think. Yeah, already 10:30.
Okay. Thank you much for Dr. Peng for his insights on the digital economy and its impacts on economic growth, labor and inequality, international trade, market structure, and the financial system. So now, anyone has questions? Okay, let me first ask. I have two questions related to the digital economy. So the first one is about the finance. You have talked about the payment system. So I think the digital economy has a broader impact on the financial system, not only limited to the payment, but how about think about the impacts of digital technology on like an investor or debt management or lending behavior, whatever. the other sectors additional to the payment. And the second is, I think the digital revolution this time is a little bit different from the industrial revolution because of the speed. So the digital revolution only takes, I think, maybe 10 or 20 years. It's too fast. So, but the industrial revolution takes more than 100 years. So this kind of difference, where I think it will bring more challenge to our society, especially how to embrace the digital dividends for many countries that they are not prepared for this kind of transformation, and many also like the people that are less included in this kind of revolution. So how do you think about it?
Okay, that's maybe the second question first, and the reason why digital transformation moved much faster is I think fundamentally is this non-rivalry feature. Right? Basically, the marginal cost of expansion is almost zero. So that's why it can quickly invade almost every sector of the economy. Right? Whereas in the traditional the industrial revolution is much slower paced because you incur cost in terms of expansion into other areas. So that now, what is the implication of that? I would say, obviously, you raised a very complicated question, but there may be many angles on this issue. My quick reaction is that maybe size matters or network, because marginal the cost is zero or near zero. Marginal cost is near zero, but the benefit, how much is the benefit? The benefit depends on the network effect, right? And therefore the size matters in terms of benefit. So from this angle, I think a bigger economy, a larger population may be an important factor. So that's the second question. Your first question, the digital finance, I think yes, you raised a very important one. So what I'm talking about today is the very narrow sense, only from payments point of view. There are many other like fintech, the big data to reduce information asymmetry and therefore reduce the need for collateral in traditional banking lending, etc. I think those are the areas we need to probably that will be important players, important factors that will change in a way the financial landscape in the future going forward. And of course that very much is partly related to the regulation side, how quickly, in what way this will proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone has a question? Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Peng, for your insights. And today we are goes to the end. So thank you again, and thank you for all the participants in this webinar, and look forward to meeting you in next one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.